Hello, everybody. This is the Monday Night Pod, Tyler Fensky. Tonight, we're going to be continuing in Psalm 53, really focusing on verse 4 here. It says, "Will the evildoers never learn? Those who devour my people as men eat bread, and who do not call on God. There they were, overwhelmed with dread, where there was nothing to dread."
Yeah, we started off tonight in the talk of Bible study about just kind of differentiating between fear that can be a positive thing versus fear that we want to eliminate from our lives. Fear, a positive thing, meaning like, just the natural fear you might feel in a fight or flight situation, where you're having that fear reaction, body sends adrenaline. That's a good thing. It's making you stronger. It's making you faster. It's making you more focused. What we were talking about tonight was just fear in terms of how it's more commonly known and talked about, which is just fears that are chronic, or I'm fear of man, or fear of the situation, fear of the future, worries, anxieties, chronic fears that just keep us locked up and keep us from taking the right risks, from seizing the right opportunities, and just limit our life.
Yeah. When you say like healthy fears, one thing that comes to mind is when I was a kid, I was at a ski resort with my family, and to get back to the top of the hill, you have to take a chairlift. And there's points throughout the chairlift where you're 30, 40 feet in the air, and it's literally just you on the chair sitting there with, nowadays they have railings, but at the time it was literally just you on the edge, 30, 40 feet in the air. And when I was younger, I moved and slipped, and all of a sudden I fell. And thankfully, my dad was with me on my side, and he caught me. Mm-hmm. And I remember the feeling of fear, literally, not only fear of heights, but literally fear I'm dangling by this lift, by my dad, how strong and how long my dad's grip can last, right? Yeah. And literally, that's the difference between me and death, right? And I remember just being overwhelmed with fear and anxiety, and that's a healthy thing, right? The Lord puts that inside us, one, for survival, another reason to give us the ability to keep going when we're in extreme situations. But the fear, like we talked about, the chronic fear that really holds us back, that makes men shrink in life, the fears of this world, the anxieties of this world, of the fear of men, the fear of the future, the fear of the unknown, and uncertainty in circumstances and situations. That's really what we're going to go after tonight. One of the verses that you talked about tonight was in Isaiah, that told us where we were to direct our fears and what's the healthy place for it.
Yeah, we really had two major points tonight of just attacking fear and addressing that in your life. The first one is just shift your thinking. And that's why these verses in Isaiah 8 are so good, where it says in verse 12, "Do not call conspiracy everything that these people call conspiracy. Do not fear what they fear, and do not dread it. The Lord Almighty is the one you are to regard as holy. He is the one you are to fear. He is the one you are to dread." So the Bible's not telling you to just, kind of the pop psychology out there where, fear is just an acronym, false evidence appearing real, and, you're just going to forget about your fears and don't, just forget about your fears and don't think about them. It's not telling you that. It's telling you to replace it. So instead of having fear that's linked up with just the comings and goings of this world, how everybody else is thinking, fearing what they fear. Instead, it's the Lord Almighty is the one you are to regard as holy. He is the one you are to fear. He is the one you are to dread. So you're going to replace that fear, whether that's societal fear or something that's been taught culturally or has been passed down from your parents, or something maybe that's been just inculcated in you where you're often in fear of just people in authority, whatever that may be. You're replacing that with a healthy fear of God.
Yeah.
He is the one you are to fear. He is the one you are to dread.
Yeah, and how do we do that? This comes from Romans 12, verse 2. It says, "Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." Right? So how do I shift my mind from fear of men and all these things to the fear of the Lord? How do I replace that? The Bible says I can literally go through a transformation, a metamorphosis. The same way you talked about tonight, where a caterpillar turns into a butterfly. Metamorphosis. We have that same opportunity to do so, replace that fear in the negative to fear in the positive of fearing the Lord. We do that through the transferring of our mind, right? And from there, we're able to know what God's will is, and that should give us some security.
Yeah, it's that aspect of faith.
Yeah.
Faith is being sure of what we hope for, certain of what we do not see. So if you have faith in God, then you know that God is in control of all of it. And he is working things together for your good, as you are promised in Romans 8. That if you love God and you are called according to his purpose, that's what he is doing for you. Then now that you can walk in faith with that it's God that's ordering everything for you, working it out for your good. So therefore, these circumstances, these transient circumstances that may say that things are terrible right now, or this is something you should be worried about or have anxiety about, or how is this going to work out? What does the future look like? Instead, replacing that with just faith in God, that God is working it out for your good. And now a lot of that fear can just drop, right? Because you have a mandate here of where you're going to fear God instead. That's your calling, right? The same thing that Jesus tells you in Luke 12, to fear God. He says, I tell you to, fear him who has the power to throw you into hell, right? God. So it's like, the furthest man can go, as Jesus tells you in Luke 12, is the killing of the body. So if you just take that away in terms of psychologically, realizing that's just the worst man that could ever do to you, right? Where Jesus says, I tell you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body and after that can do no more. But I will show you whom you should fear. Fear him who after the killing of the body has power to throw you into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear him. And this reassurance here, are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies, in that one of them is forgotten by God. Indeed, the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. So it's like God is watching over you. God is in control. He's working it together for your good. So you tie that just command of fearing God instead of man. Don't align your thinking with the thinking of this world, the comings and goings of this age and cultural things, but instead to fear God with just that assurance of faith. And now you're shifting your thinking away from that. And right there, a lot of fear can drop.
Yeah, once you shift your thinking, it's like, I understand that God is in control. I have the right perspective, right? It's the Lord who controls everything. And once I understand that in faith, being sure of what we hope for, being certain of what we do not see, when you can have the confidence that comes from that, and your mind is shifted to that perspective, it's like all of a sudden you feel limitless. You feel like nothing could stop me, nobody can get in my way, because it's the Lord who is with me.
Yeah, the Lord is my helper, of whom shall I be afraid?
And if it's the Lord who purposes it, it will come to pass, right? And if you get that, if you're aligned with that, and if your mind could be on that level, and if your perspective could be on that level, and have that level of faith that comes with it, all of a sudden everything changes for you. All of a sudden you realize how big God is. It's the Lord who has the power to judge you and send you to hell.
Right.
And how small people are, how small your circumstances are, how small your future is in comparison to how big God is.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because Isaiah has a lot to say about fear, and you saying that makes me think of one of my just favorite verses in the Bible, where Isaiah 51, he tells you, lift up your eyes to the heavens, look at the earth beneath. The heavens will vanish like smoke, the earth will wear out like a garment, and its inhabitants die like flies. So this is all going away. It's all going away. But my salvation will last forever. My righteousness will never fail. So that was the first thing we talked about tonight, was just shifting your thinking. The second was the concept of action alleviates anxiety. Action alleviates anxiety. And for that, we were looking off of Proverbs 22, verse 13, where it says that the sluggard says, there is a lion outside, or I will be murdered in the streets. So it doesn't say that, the fool says that. It says the sluggard says there's a lion outside, or I'll be murdered in the streets. So that association with just being lazy and being fearful. So what's going on there? Why is that dynamic tied together? As we talked about tonight, it's like if you are, you have a purpose from God. You have a calling on your life. And if you're walking in that and you're taking action towards that, you're going to feel pretty good about yourself, and that drops a lot of fears because you're conscious congruent. Mm-hmm. So the call that's on your life, you're walking in action with that. It's the same thing that if you had some kind of deadline for work, or you got a deadline for a school project, and you're not following through and you're getting behind on that, that naturally creates anxiety because you know you need to do it, and you're not doing it.
Yeah.
Much bigger than any school project or work assignment is your life. Mm-hmm. So if you're not taking action towards what God has called you to do and you're being lazy, that's where that anxiety, fear, and worry builds in. And that's where, show me somebody who's lazy, I'm going to show you somebody who's fearful.
Yeah.
So it's that action that alleviates anxiety. And that can be physical things, where you're setting your hands physically to taking action on things that you need to. That can also just be application of learning. Are you learning towards what you should be doing? Are you growing your knowledge base? Are you stubborn and not coachable? You're not teachable, so you lack the humility to grow. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that go into stepping into your purpose, but there has to be things in place on a daily basis that are building you up into what you are called to do. Mm-hmm. And that in and of itself will alleviate a lot of worry and anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talk about the first step is having the right faith, the right perspective. Mm-hmm. Bible says that faith without works is dead, right? And so when I think of a lazy Christian, that's an oxymoron. Those two words, lazy and Christian, should not go together. Mm-hmm. They're not supposed to go together, right? And the Bible says a lot about laziness. It says a lot about work ethic, right? Especially in Proverbs, right? And so the Lord wants us to do things. He made us to do things. He made us to take action, right? And so it's funny because when you look at fears and the fears that bound people, right? Fears that bind people and hold them down. It's like there's this box, right, where people are afraid. And they let it create a little box, a little bubble for them, right? And within that, they're so afraid of going outside of that box, right? Whether it be fear of men, like we've talked about fear of circumstances, fear of the
failure.
future. Fear of failure, for sure,
big one.
right? To where instead of stepping outside of that fear and facing it, all of a sudden, they would rather be comfortable within it and live with it, right? And so they let themselves become a victim. They let themselves become a martyr. They let themselves become that last angry man, right? They let themselves become that misunderstood genius, right? The world's just against me. They don't get it. Right. All these different things just to hold on to that comfort bubble, living in that fear, rather than stepping outside of it and confronting it, right? Because it's interesting. It's the acute fears that they let them be bound by, right? That if they would just address that, right? That they make the acute, small, instant fears this big thing. Meanwhile, it's the chronic fears that keep them bound. Yeah. If they would just step outside and address the acute fears with action, action alleviates anxiety. Mm-hmm. If you would just step outside of that and confront those acute fears, you would realize there's nothing to fear at all, right? It's just a little discomfort. And once you can step outside and handle this little bit of discomfort, all of a sudden you realize you're capable and you can handle this amount and all of a sudden that amount. And all of a sudden you realize, especially if you have the right perspective with faith, it's like there's nothing to fear, right? Except the common things to man, fear of heights. There is risk. Life is risky, right? But how much greater would it be to confront that and know that the Lord's on your side and have a life and fulfill the purpose that the Lord has for you, right? Because you're not going to do it without that, right? There are many fears and many dangers and many obstacles in the way of the great men of God, right? And you're not going to step into that without confronting those acute fears, right? But are you going to stay inside that little bubble and turn yourself into that victim martyr or so forth, right? And let it consume you and let it bind you and let it keep you down to where you're not living in faith. You're not becoming the man of God or fulfilling the purpose of God that he had for you, right? So when I think of fear, and like we've talked about, how to get over that and get past that, it's such a vital thing, not only in life, but in life as a believer, because it's always on the other side of that, right? Your purpose is always on the other side of that fear. You're going to have to step outside your comfort zone and confront it, right? And the Lord's saying he's with you on this, right? He doesn't just hang you out to dry. It's like, if you can just have enough faith, and if you can just take the action, how many times do we see the Lord just align everything afterward? right?
Yeah, it's, so I didn't get to it tonight, but it was in my notes. It's, important thing to remember is your blessing is going to be work. The two scriptures that stand out to me with that, the first one is just Numbers 11, where, so we know manna was the bread of heaven, as it says in Psalm 78, right? Men ate, the bread of angels, right? That's from Psalm 78, verse 25. Men ate the bread of angels. So this manna would come down for them. What a lot of people miss about the manna is they still had work to do with it, right? So this is Numbers 11. So it says the people went around gathering it and then ground it in a hand mill or crushed it in a mortar. They cooked it in a pot or made it into cakes. So they had to still go out and gather this and still ground it in a hand mill, crushed it in a mortar, still prepared all the above. That's where a lot of people are still stuck. They think the manna is going to come just fully prepared for them, fly into their tent on a plate, not realizing you're going to have to go out and actually get it.
Yeah.
There's work involved in this. There's work in the whole process of gathering the manna, going out, gathering the manna every day, then grinding it, crushing this mortar, now preparing it, now cooking it. Yeah. Now, there it is to eat.
Yeah.
Same thing as, when the temple tax with Peter and Jesus. Peter comes back and says Jesus was the first to speak. And then he walks them through it, and he says, so that we may not offend them, go to the lake and take out your line, catch a fish. The first one that you catch, open it. There'll be a 4 coin in there. Pay that for me and you. But it wasn't like he walked in the house and Jesus said, boom, there's the 4 drachma tax right here. Take it to him.
Yeah.
Still go to the lake, get your line, get your fishing tackle, go out there, cast the line, catch the fish, open it up. Now there it is.
Yeah.
So there's always just that aspect of work involved in the blessing, because we're not meant to lay around on the couch. That's not our calling. And so many people think that waiting on the Lord means I'm going to lay on the couch. It's not. What gifts and talents and abilities do you have? Go out there and start putting some sweat equity into it and start working, putting your talents on display, the things that God has given you to do. Now God will bless the work of your hands, So it's that aspect of, if you're laying around and thinking that it's all just going to fall onto your plate, it's not going to. And then, of course, you're getting filled with worry and fear and anxiety because you're not conscious congruent.
Yeah.
So you're not walking in what God has called you to do. You're not putting action to it.
Yeah.
And now it's going to fill you with a lot more fear than you should have.
Yeah.
Because you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
It's like you got the deadline of life, and you're not responding to that at all.
Yeah.
Whatever your hand finds to do, work at it as for the Lord, not for men.
Yeah.
Right? Work at it with all your heart. That's in Colossians and Ecclesiastes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I understand that the reason for that, we value things that we had to earn.
Yes.
We value things that we had to work for.
Yes. If God just dumped the blessing in your lap, you would not value it.
You would not appreciate it.
Right.
And
you would not handle it the right way.
And a lot of times there's discomfort that comes with that. A lot of times there's uncertainty that comes from it. But the Lord says, cast all your cares on me, for I care for you. Right? The Lord cares for us. Right? There's nothing that we can't take to Him. We don't have to be ridden with anxiety through the process. Even though there's so many uncertainties. There's so many uncertainties in life. There's so many risks in life. Mm-hmm. If you fear God, meaning you love the Lord and you obey His commandments, right? There's congruence and peace of mind that comes from I'm living right with the Lord, correct, right? And a lot of that has to do with correct, the fear of the Lord. I love Him, therefore I obey Him, right? And from there, if I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, if I'm casting everything to Him, praying like it's all on Him, but working like it's all on me, all of a sudden it's like you have the right recipe you're not bound by fear. You're fearing the right thing, which is the Lord. And with Him, you realize I'm limitless. There's nothing I can't achieve with the Lord by my side. That Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
Yeah. So those are the two key applications when it comes to just fear. And if you're listening to this, I'm sure There's something in your life, whether that's fear of man or fear of just what's going on in your life right now, circumstance, maybe fear of the future, situations, whatever that may be. Those are your two action points that you can immediately apply to shift your thinking on it. Put your faith in God. Replace that fear, whatever it is, with the fear of God. God's in control of it. It's him you are to fear, and then action alleviates anxiety. Those are the two things that you put together. And remember that when it comes to fear and faith, it's fear that says, what if? What if this happens? What if that happens? What about this? What about that? What if I fail? What if they still don't believe in me? What if they still hate on me? What if this happens? That's what fear says. Fear says, what if? Faith says, even if. Even if it's not working right away. Even if I have to struggle. Even if I have to persevere. Even if it takes me 6 times. I'm still going to try the 7th. Right? Fear says, what if? Faith says, even if.
That's Psalm 53, concept of fear. Next week, we'll be kicking it off with Psalm 54. It's the Monday Night Pod, Tyler and Fesky.